Welcome to MAGAU, where we seek to educate our fellow citizens about the spiritual core of the MAGA movement and to evaluate how the values and beliefs that comprise this core, to evaluate how well they conform to ideals of Christianity, conservatism, and the American way. So this is our first case study, and we're going to look at the now infamous Signalgate episode that broke on March 24th and has consumed the news cycle this week. A quick recap. The Atlantic editor, Jeffrey Goldberg, published a story in which he claimed that he had been accidentally texted war plans in the recent bombing of Yemen, which took place on March 15th, because he was added inadvertently to the Signal app chat by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Now, in his first report, he left out these sensitive details appropriately because he knew these are the kinds of top secret classified information that shouldn't be shared with the public. But when Pete Hegseth denied that any war plans were shared on this thread, when the White House tried to downplay that anything appropriate was shared, this forced their hands, so to speak, and in public interest, they released the rest of the text, showing clearly that exact war plans or exact attack plans, whatever you want to call it, were indeed shared, along with some high-level, very sensitive policy discussions around support for Europe. Now, so much has been said already. The focus is not here on the evident stupidity of this, the evident negative consequences of this for national security and trust of our allies. Instead, I want to focus on what this, cut through all the noise and really focus on what the chat itself and the administration's response reveals about its beliefs and values and how these are clearly unconservative and clearly unchristian. So first, let's look at the chat itself. And this is, we know about this because of this accident of providence that this reporter was included on it. Let's not lose sight of what's going on itself on this chat. I'm a teacher. I talk to my children about this who are 10 and 13 years old. I've talked to some of my middle school students about this. And even these children know instinctively how unwise it is, how foolish it is, how inappropriate it is to discuss this kind of information on a social media app, on a group app, on your phone. But this is what MAGA does. MAGA just spurns cultural norms. It spurns sort of the things that to most people seem to be just the norms, the common sense ways of doing things that the rest of us follow. It's also likely that this action was illegal because it breaks laws on handling classified information and where it should be shared. There are certain places where this information should be shared and with who. So it's likely that the action was illegal as well. And that anyone else in the CIA or military who did this would be held accountable, perhaps facing jail time, perhaps in the military facing court-martial. Now, conservatives have always been defined by a reverence for norms, a reverence by the norms that arise from the wisdom that's accumulated by our ancestors over long periods of time. And with that, conservatives understand that, what it means to be an American, what it means to be a democracy is to have a commitment to the rule of law. And MAGA is the exact opposite of that. It flaunts the rule of law. It has contempt for the norms that sort of bind everyone else, and it flagrantly breaks them. Now let's look at the response, which comes straight from the Trump playbook, which is to deny, deflect, and accuse. And Trump just approaches any sort of scandal, any sort of effort to hold him accountable in the same way. So the denials, I mentioned already that Hegseth denied just blatantly that there were any war plans or anything classified that was shared on this. That's proven to be false. And since this has been falsified, they've been deflecting. They've been deflecting blame onto others. They've been attacking the integrity and credibility of Jeffrey Goldberg, who is the editor-in-chief of perhaps the most reputable magazine in the country that started in 1854, before the Civil War. They've been making up the most implausible excuses about how this happened. Mike Waltz saying that somehow Goldberg's number was sucked in to the Signal app, the Signal app chat, accusing Goldberg of perpetrating a hoax even. And all this just makes their behavior seem more absurd and just increases the scandal. So we looked at the lawlessness, and with lawlessness comes hypocrisy. Many of the people in this chat, including Hesketh and Marco Rubio, vehemently criticized Hillary Clinton, her misuse of emails, and demanded that she be held accountable to the law, the full extent of the law, which I agree. I agree at the time what she did was wrong. She shouldn't have been given special treatment. And they made this argument in public. But who in MAGA world is arguing the same for Hesketh, for Mike Waltz, for others who are involved in this chat? The severity of this is arguably far worse than Hillary. That's not the point, but still, her emails weren't compromised, and there was no evidence that she was sharing war plans to attack a foreign adversary. So where are the calls that they should be held accountable under the law? But don't hold your breath for Trump to speak up. He's not going to do anything either. So Jesus, warns us sternly multiple times of hypocrisy. And this is so important to avoid hypocrisy, that the main flaw, the chief characteristic of the main flaw of his chief opponents, the Pharisees, was hypocrisy. And Jesus warns repeatedly for his followers not to be hypocrites like the Pharisees are. But contra to the way of Jesus, MAGA is shamelessly hypocritical through and through. So finally, we see in this episode a characteristic of the MAGA way, which is arrogant lying. So we all recognize that the best way to respond, the right and just appropriate way to respond to such an obviously grave mistake, an obviously grave error like this, is to admit wrongdoing, accept responsibility, and vow and strive to change. But doing so requires a measure of humility that's simply absent from Trump, and this is reflected in the spirit of his followers. And the administration has lied in the face of smoking gun evidence here. Trump is now resorting to his favorite accusation to deflect blame, which is a witch hunt. We know it's not a witch hunt. We know this is a legitimate concern. We know that it opens up lines of inquiry and questioning that we have the right to know, where our national security is at stake, where our global standing is at stake. But arrogance allows for no admission of wrongdoing, no matter how obvious it is. And so when it comes to arrogance and the fruit of arrogance, which is lying, to cover up the truth and thinking that other people are too stupid or indifferent to care that you're lying, these are clearly abominations to God. These are clearly things that God hates. So I want to survey a few verses of the proverb from the book of Proverbs that communicate this very directly. First, Proverbs 8:13 says, "I hate pride and arrogance, the way of evil and perverted speech." Next, Proverbs 11:2. "When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom." Proverbs 12:2 says, "Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord." So God hates arrogance and lying. Arrogant lying, though, is the way of Trump. It's the spirit of MAGA, and anyone who's tied themselves to Trump will be characterized by arrogant lying, because you have to lie to stay in his good graces. So this strategy of denying, deflecting, accusing, not accepting responsibility is definitely unchristian. Well, thank you for listening to this MAGAU case study on Signalgate. To support us, I hope that you will subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow us, and share this video with your patriotic friends.